It is said that fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And in tonight's story, we have several fools, though there are no angels. It is a tale known as The Woods. There are places in this world that are best left alone, and the woods that grow over the Peak Ports mountain are one such place. Old and isolated, it sounded like the perfect location to go camping to Jean. More so because of the stories that the Encompass investment firm had bought up large portions of the area and were planning to build a ski resort. So she gathered her 3 friends and they made their drive up the mountains. The town of Peaksport itself was unwelcoming. The glares from locals as they drove up the road brought to mind the many strange stories of the area. She didn't want to admit it to her friends, but she wasn't sure she didn't believe at least a few of those stories. Cryptids, UFOs, ghost sightings were all common, to say nothing of the backwoods traveler-hunting lunatics known as the Soe tribe. But this would be the last chance anyone had to go camp in those woods. So, of course, they had to take it. The only problem they had was none of them actually knew the roads of the mountains. They drove for hours, most of which was spent trying to find a place they could call a campsite. But the last hour was spent trying to pretend they were not hopelessly lost on a haunted or cursed mountain. They started to bicker and question one another, so much so they failed to notice the sun quickly sinking behind the mountain. The darkness of night only made it that much harder to safely drive. The road was becoming more and more of a trail, and in time, that road gave way to thick mud. The car strained to move through it. It was becoming harder and harder for Jen and the others to deny. The car simply couldn't handle the mountain. Worse yet, they realized their phones were unable to get any signal. Cody commented how it was only a few minutes before the S-Killer showed up. Jen got goosebumps. The last thing she wanted to hear about, while on top of an urban legend hotspot, was the current serial killer back in Amistad. But Cody felt no reason to relent.
You do know he's real, right? The S-Killer? He wears this golden wolf mask, and they say he tracks you on that new social media app they've got. And once he gets his hands on you, he deletes everything off your phone and leaves nothing but a picture of the letter S. They say he's human, but only barely. He has these big, bulging, buggy eyes. He loves knives. And they say he likes rock.
Shut up!
Jen's shouting startled everyone else in the car, and after a moment she apologized for yelling. But before she could say anything else, the car suddenly jammed to a halt. Jen begged the car to keep moving, but it was no good. The mud had it trapped. That was when she realized her friends were all looking outside the windows. They looked confused and frightened. Finally, from the back seat, Jackie whimpered a quiet, "What are those?" Jen looked out the window into the gloom of night and saw shapes slowly walking from the tree line. They were too small and numerous to be wolves or bears, and slowly they all realized it was a large pack of dogs of varying sizes and breeds. Cody was starting to say some curse when the dogs charged the car, barking, howling, snapping, and pawing at it from all sides. The car rocked, and everyone inside had to hold on for dear life to keep from being thrashed around. Fear overtook them, and at the first sight of an opening they bailed out of the car, flailing into the mud. It wasn't until they had reached the tree line they realized the dogs were still attacking the car, Cody waved to the others and whispered,
"Forget the car and let them have it. We can double back and get out of here. Now, come on."
No one liked the idea, but they followed Cody, trying not to make any noise. Tragically, though, the hike through the woods had been even more difficult than the drive. The ground became even more soggy and thick, until the group had to come to a stop. The woods were completely flooded, like a swamp. They stood there, trying to think of a good choice of actions, when Brandon spoke for the first time in the entire trip, simply asking, "Are those headstones?" Everyone at once used their phone's light to look around, and just a few yards away from them was a clearing, and jutting up from the water were indeed grave markers. Cody once again felt the need to speak.
"I know about this. There used to be this water treatment plant up here in the mountains until these eco-terrorists came and destroyed it, flooded the entire valley. Parts of Peaksport got washed away. I guess that included the local cemetery."
Before anyone had the chance to tell him to be quiet, they all heard a sound of movement. There was something in the water, moving among the trees. Stiff, shambling movements that ducked and avoided the lights of their phones. It quickly dawned on the group that there were several of these things. Finally, they cornered one of the creatures between their lights and saw it. A hideous thing. Something that could only be described as having been once human. A corpse, rotten and mutilated. Its flesh and proportions had been warped by visible water damage. It shambled out from behind a tree while others started rising up from the swamp. Worst of all was how their mouths moved as if they were speaking, but all that came out of their mouths was a filthy water and a vile, gargling sound. More of them rose up, as if answering each other's calls. These creatures, though clearly dead, were communicating and organizing an attack. That was when a strange soft music began to play. It sounded like a flute. Jen looked behind them and saw a light fading in from the tree line. Slowly, a figure floating just above the water appeared in the light. A ghastly, deformed man playing a long, thin musical instrument. And all around him were those dogs from before. Though they looked different now. Bathed in the soft glow of this musician, they seemed less frightening. Almost familiar somehow.
"So, is anybody on our side here?"
Cody's voice snapped Jen out of her thoughts. She was about to answer when suddenly the music stopped. In that instant, it was as if the world itself had taken a sharp breath. And then, like a wave of ghastly fur and flashing teeth, the dogs charged. The group could only cover up and brace for impact, but with incredible grace the dogs ran past them and crashed violently into the ghouls. Jen finally found her voice and answered Cody, saying,
"Dogs. Definitely dogs. Run."
And together the group ran in the directions the dogs had come from, holding on to each other as they stumbled through the water. Jen allowed herself one brief moment to stop and look up at the glowing figure. In spite of his ugly, deformed head, there was an otherworldly gentleness in his sunken gray eyes. It was peaceful, even with the noise of dogs and ghouls fighting just a few yards away. The figure nodded to her, and she understood. They ran through the woods till they saw the road again, and there was the car. Though covered in claw marks and bites, it was free of the mud, and had been turned around, pointing back towards the safety of Amistad. No one questioned it. They simply piled into the car and raced back down the mountain. Each of them agreed that whatever they had seen can have the damn mountain, and its flooded forests and graveyards. They didn't report the incident, of course. Truth be told, they had a hard time believing what they had seen, at least until a local news source revealed that plans for the resort had been put on hold indefinitely. Workers reported tools going missing, strange music playing, and several quit. But most interesting of all, were leaked images taken from the construction site's closed-circuit security system, showing what appeared to be strange dogs prowling around the grounds. Encompass officially made no comment.
Donnact itorum convenient.
I know about this.